Welcome to the Going Somewhere podcast, a podcast for anyone who finds themselves in the ambiguous adventure of young adulthood, a season marked by uncertainty, change, love, heartbreak, and a whole lot of big decisions. Sit down with me for some real and raw conversations with some incredible people as we dig into what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus in this beautiful yet complicated season of life. If this podcast helps you in any way, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. Be sure to join the conversation on Instagram by following goingsomewhere.podcast. We're all going somewhere. We might as well go there together. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Going Somewhere podcast. Today I am joined by somebody who's near and dear to my heart, Terry Parkman. How are you doing, Terry?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me out.
Hey, absolutely. Not only does Terry currently serve as the next gen pastor at River Valley in Minneapolis, but he was also my youth pastor. And so this is a special one. I've been looking forward to having Terry on. But Terry, do you just mind giving us a little bit of background, who you are, what you're doing nowadays?
Absolutely. Well, I'm living in Minneapolis with my wife, Christina. We've been married 20 years this December. And have two beautiful little girls, Avalie and Nova, 12 and 7 years old too. So they keep me busy. Like you said, I serve at River Valley Church as the next gen pastor. That's overseeing everything cradle to career. We're talking kids, youth, young adults, emerging leaders program, and just really serving them and lifting them up and finding spaces for them to reach the world around them. I also serve part-time at One Hope. One Hope's goal is God's word to every child, and I serve as their global next gen ambassador, really working on like what's impacting the next generation globally and how does that affect us locally. And finally, I serve as the global next gen lead for Empower 21. It's the largest spirit-filled network on the planet, just really seeing the goal of the Great Commission being fulfilled. I mean, big goal by 2033, but we're running after it, you know? And so it's next gen all the way across the line in whatever form it takes. That's my heart.
Love it. And, it's not like you are sitting on your hands. I think you've got a few things in the fire at all times. But, as we kind of kick off, I feel like it would be doing everybody a disservice if we didn't talk about, because I was 17 when you and Christina came to be your youth pastor. I only had you like for 1 year, but man, was it a good year.
I hope so. I hope it's a good year for you guys.
Well, it's funny because I probably had 5 youth pastors, from 7th grade till junior year. And right. I remember the first time you had us all, we were sitting around at our building, the Element, and you guys promised basically like, if you're in 7th grade now, we will for sure be your youth pastor when you graduate. And that just was like super significant. I was like a junior or senior. So for me, it was like, well, yeah, that's not hard to do. I mean, you got to be pretty bad if you get fired that fast. But just from that, just taking a group of teenagers who kind of didn't really have that covering, and you and Christina just were everything that we could have ever needed. It was amazing.
Right, man. It was a privilege to be there. I remember that. I remember the first question in that room that was asked us is, when are you guys leaving? And I were like, we're not going anywhere. And nobody believed it. And we're like, at least till 7th graders graduate. And we were there for 7 years for sure. And just seeing God do awesome things. I mean, that was a special time, such a special time in our hearts to see what God did through the young people there in Bismarck and the surrounding towns too. Yeah.
And at that time I was maybe like 130 pounds, and it become my lifelong goal to choke you out. And so I was the youth kid that would like run up behind you and try to get you in a chokehold. Cause you're also, do you still do mixed martial arts and stuff, or are you retired?
I'd like to say I'm retired from training jabronis how to fight. Not my desire. I got I did it in Bismarck, right? When I was there for the 7 years of ministry, and I was done. So when I moved to Minneapolis, I'm like, I need a break, and the break has still been going on. So after having done it for 30 years of my life, like this is the longest layoff of like 9 years I've had. So I've been doing it for myself, but not like training other people.
Okay. Yeah. And you never trained me. I would have thrown up in the corner and left like 12 minutes in. And so that wasn't for me, but you taught me how to choke somebody out, and I tried to practice on you. Do
this is just more of a general question. You've been a boots on the ground youth pastor a lot. You're not necessarily in that role today, but what's
Ugh.
your best? Do you have like a best youth ministry story? I feel like everybody has like a youth ministry story.
And there are a lot.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I don't have any like horrible ones, really dumb ones. Like towards the end of my time, I got reckless, I think. And I had this game that I would play called Fake It Till You Make It, right? And people like they would have to like eat wasabi and pretend it didn't bother them. And the last one to stay with it won. So one time we did a fake it to make it with taking paintball shots to the chest, and I had two youth leaders up there. Two youth leaders, bro. This would I would so get like sued, but I had two youth leaders up there, and it was a distance like them from the person shooting the paintball was literally 3 feet away, and they had no body armor. They just had to take it until they couldn't take it anymore. And it was a junior high service, and we gave it to a sixth grade girl. She takes the paintball gun, and the whole room is like, shoot him, and I'm in her ear like, shoot this fool. He's shooting these kids, and this poor girl is just traumatized. Man, it was the worst thing, and kind of the best thing you'd ever see. But looking back, I'd be like, I think I'd let a youth pastor like that go. Like, I think I'd let him go. So that's one of them. There's a few more about like being on missions trips and losing students and people walking away and stuff like that. But
other than,
yeah.
Well, I remember we were in Atlanta, and Caleb jumped on the back of the van between the van and the trailer, and we went back onto the main highway. That was a good one. I remember that. But
it was right out. He's in between.
Yeah.
He's on, and I'm driving like 40 miles an hour down the road with the pastor's kid riding the hitch. I lost my that time. I was like,
yeah, we saw MMA Terry that day. That's for sure. Maybe not the physical part, but the intimidation part. But my favorite memory was the night where we went out and we were TPing a bunch of youth leaders' houses, as you do, especially in that day of youth ministry. And we snuck out and we came to your guys' house and we destroyed your house pretty good. We also put hot dogs on forks all throughout your driveway, and then we wrote in ketchup on your driveway the Wiener Bandits. And I doused your wife's garden with ranch dressing, which I've never seen her more mad in that moment.
Everything was fine until you guys hit her garden. Like, I was fine with it, and then saw the ranch dressing, lost her junk. Yeah.
It's all fun and games until you mess with the lettuce. Oh, so good.
That's the wife stuff, the youth pastor stuff. Fine. But when you get to the spouse, it's like,
yep, we're done here. No, that's awesome. But I think that's the significant thing too, is when I look back at my experience of you guys being my youth pastors, one of the things that stands out the most was what we called Ignite. Just the Sunday night, we could ask questions, but you guys gave us a journal and a worship CD. And that was really how I learned how to like have time with the Lord. I've probably filled 40 journals since then, but that's one that's one I keep at the top of my thing of journals, because it reminds me that it all started with somebody giving it to me and teaching me how to do it. And so just your investment into the next generation isn't something that's new. Your platform's different, but I just appreciate who you are, and it's been so consistent all the way through. But I'm just excited to chat about just your heart for next gen. Something that I just admire about you and Christina is just your ability to look at the culture today and understand not just the statistics about young adults and next gen, but really what's happening and how we as a church can come alongside. So I'm just going to kind of give you the floor and we'll kind of go from there. But what are some of the things that you're observing right now?
Within the next gen? Oh man, I'll say that this generation is probably one of the most disruptive and disrupted generations in history. And it definitely is. You look at Generation Z, which is young adults right now. I mean, Gen Alpha is 6th grade, 7th maybe. And so you have Gen Z fully in the world running the show. And it is the most numerous generation in history and ethnically diverse generation in history. Innovative and entrepreneurial one as well. But it's because of what we've experienced with COVID, pandemic, politics, with social injustice, like right here in Minneapolis, it's also been the most hesitant generation in history, simply because they don't know what's around the corner. So what do I do? Like the number one question I'm asked by young leaders is, how do I know that the vision that God has given me won't be delayed because of something else that comes around the corner? And my answer to them is always the same. What does an obstacle or perceived obstacle have anything to do with God's vision? Maybe the very reason God gave you the vision is to meet the needs or the problems that that obstacle creates. And how horrible would it be if at the end of the day, you change the game on the vision that God gave you for an obstacle that doesn't exist in the first place? And so when we look at this generation, it is a generation we have prayed for years, and they are on the scene, like entrepreneurial, pragmatic, all those things, but they're also hesitant. And now not only are we navigating that and helping a generation that has kind of a half failure to launch, but we're also having to navigate new disruptions like Web3, AI, and how that's going to impact the expectations of people who come to church. And so we're not only talking next gen, but we're talking about the future of the capital C church at large.
Yeah, that's big picture.
Big picture.
That's a lot going on with it. And I think you mentioned some of the disrupted moments, the political tensions, just the 2020 election. And obviously we're again kind of in the early portions of that, where that's just going to become more of the conversations and stuff. And so how, maybe even as kind of that young adult, that maybe that 18 to 24, what's kind of the positive way to look at some of these kind of disruptive events in culture and in society around us and moving forward in our faith?
Absolutely. Well, what we have to understand is that disruption isn't new. And often disruption is initiated by God, in order to advance his call forward. And you have to understand that each generation is equipped with the gifts and callings to meet the needs of the generation they're a part of. So the answer to the prayers of this world are found in the next generation. They just are. We have to believe that. You look at the tribe of Issachar in Chronicles, and it talks about how God rose up 700 men and women from the tribe of Issachar to help Israel understand the signs of the times and know the best direction for Israel to take. And the next generation of leaders, youth and young adults, are that tribe of Issachar in every generation. God never leaves a generation abandoned. And my encouragement to this generation is that what God has instilled in you needs to see the light of day. It can't be like pushed down. You can't like go on social media and scroll and see if other people are doing the thing that God has called you to do. This generation doesn't need confirmation. This generation needs conviction to believe what God told them in the first place. And so my encouragement to them, and my encouragement to anybody listening, is don't compare what God's put in your heart to other people. Other people have never been where God is about to take you. And somebody had to be first. Somebody had to believe that what God was telling them was true and then step out in faith. And adding to that, there is nothing that God will give you that doesn't require faith, because it's impossible to please God without faith. So he's not going to give you a vision that doesn't have a component of faith in it. So maybe the very next step that this generation and members of this next generation need to take isn't getting a clarity on the vision that God's given them, but having the faith to step out in it, even though there's ambiguity on the other side. It's that this generation has been equipped to lead. And it's not going to be because we have an inability to change the game. It's going to be because we have an unwillingness to change the game. And there's a big difference. And so my encouragement, man, is that we are engineered and built and designed to meet the needs of this generation for sure.
Wow, I love that. I love that idea of like, it's in us, and I think it can be so missed. And I feel like one of the things in the conversations that I have a lot are just around the idea of, once that kind of season of high school into college and you kind of settle into jobs and that career side of things, there tends to be kind of like this is life now. And it's not all mundane and monotonous, but I think a lot of people fight against that, of like, the pull is into the mundane and monotonous. And not that those are bad things, but
right.
How do you just speak to like rediscovering calling, or even allowing God to shape your calling in a new season, in a new place, when maybe you feel like the calling can't be that significant because of where I'm at and what I'm doing now?
Yeah. Well, what's wonderful is the word says that the gifts and callings of God are without regret, meaning that they're inside of you from before the time you're born. And you don't see all of them at once. You see a component of them. And as you're faithful to God and what he's put in front of you, more emerge. And sometimes what feels mundane is just our inactivity with what God's already placed in our hands. And so when I think of calling, when God called me to be a youth pastor and I stepped in Bismarck, I was like, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. This is the best job in the world. The president's got it bad because I got it good. Like, that's what I felt. And at the end of my time in Bismarck, when I shifted into lead youth ministry and the next gen ministry, it wasn't because I didn't want to do youth ministry or had a contempt or because I was bad at it. We were at our height of ministry, but because God was lowering the dimmer switch of passion for youth ministry proper and increasing my leadership capacity for leading those who lead the next generation. And so understanding that the more faithful you are to God's call, he isn't going to give you a new calling or say, well, now God's done with me in this area, but he is going to expand your perspective and show you other aspects of what exists. It's almost like being shown a diamond, but you think a diamond is just one facet because that's all you see. And as you're faithful, he begins to pull you back and turn that calling. So you're like, now I got to be faithful to this and this and this. So for me, youth ministry's never left. But the way I've applied what God has put in me to youth ministry has changed. And so there are seasons of mundane for sure. And when I hit seasons of mundane, especially in regard to my call or the call of God in my life, it's not my calling, it's God's calling in me. When I've hit seasons of that, I've asked myself the question, am I being faithful to what God has put in front of my face, or do I have contempt for it? And am I not engaging it with everything that God's given me? Number two, when I think of being in those seasons, I ask myself, am I fully exploring the land and the level that God has given me? Because many of us are addicted to levels. We get to the next level and then we ask God for the next one right away rather than fully inhabiting the space he's given us. So have I fully inhabited and wrung myself out for this space? And number three, am I being disobedient? Has God called me to make a move earlier, and have I stayed in this place a little too long? Has the fruit gotten not ripe but rotten on the vine? And is it now just what I'm feeling, the sense of rotten fruit more than ripe fruit, and just waiting for something else to happen? So it could be a failure to launch. Other times, the fourth one that people sleep on is maybe exactly where I am is a call of God in my life, and this is a perfect place to be. Because it's not that you're not ready for the season. Maybe the next season isn't ready for you. And you got to wait and be faithful where you're at until that season ripens for you. All those things go right back to obedience and faithfulness. And I think it's important that we find our significance in being obedient than in the season or the title or the job or whatever else we're assigned. We find more significance in that obedience step. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I get that too, because and you know my story pretty good, and so does our audience that's been listening for a while. But just the call to college ministry felt like, oh, this is forever. Like, this is it. This is the one. I found it, and that's why when we felt like a transition was coming, and we felt like the transition was coming before we knew where or what, and that's kind of like the whole theme of the podcast is going somewhere. God told Abraham to go to the place that I'll show you, and I feel like that's how a lot of young adults feel, a lot of college students feel, is that it's ambiguous. It is kind of intimidating. And so I think sometimes though we can get kind of caught between what identity is, what calling is, and then what assignment is. And so how would you help people just identify their calling, of people that don't think they have a calling? Maybe they're sitting there going, well, I'm a fifth grade math teacher and that's what I do to get my paycheck.
Yeah.
But how do you identify what my calling is from God?
Yeah. Your calling doesn't always have to be your vocation. Let me say that. It's not bad collecting a paycheck so that you can pursue your calling as well. But at the end of the day, all of our calling, all of our mission, all of our assignment is as we go, we make disciples of all nations. That's what all of us are supposed to do. There is no mincing that. How we do that is different for all of us, but it doesn't have to be a vocation for you in order for it to be a calling or an on-mission thing. There are so many things that I do that I don't get a paycheck or a title, but I am fully fulfilling the call of God on my life to see it done. So I think the very first important thing to understand is, do you enjoy being that fifth grade teacher? Do you love it and collect a paycheck? Yeah, then do it. One of the greatest and most freeing things when it comes to calling that I was told is, love God and do what brings you joy. And we're like, yeah, but if it brings me joy, maybe it's wrong. Well, are you sinning? No? Okay. Love God. My child, I am a fallen creation. And if I want my child to love God, I want her to do what brings her joy. Like, I don't want her to be like, it brings me joy, so I'm going to say no. Are you nuts? Go do what brings you joy. And so what brings me joy is serving the next generation. Do I get to get paid for it too? For sure. But if I had to go do something else, would I still serve the next generation? 110%. And so I think it's absolutely vital when we think of our call or whatever, like it is a misnomer to say, I don't have a call. That's not, I would say that's an abdication of your responsibility as a believer. Say, well, I'm not going to do anything because I don't have a call. You're called to make disciples. How you make disciples is totally between you and God, but you got to be doing it. So for me, let me have an aside that attaches to this. A couple of years ago, I was on sabbatical, a month sabbatical. I'm sitting by the pool. My wife took the kids because they're driving me nuts. So I'm sitting there by the pool and I'm like, God, what do you want me to do in my life? He goes, write down in 3 columns everything that you love about River Valley, One Hope, traveling and speaking, and Power 21, whatever else. And I wrote it all down. I said, all right, God, which one is going to bring me like that next season? Which is the one I'm going to go in on? And God said, none of them. He goes, eventually, when you're faithful long enough, there is no one place that can fulfill all of the call I've given you. And that's the word for, I think, today, because it's not River Valley's responsibility to fulfill my calling. It's up to me to step into that. And God said, I have given you lanes to run in to fulfill the totality of it. So you can't say no to any of it because I've been faithful by giving you spaces for you to run these other horses. And so he said, the biggest thing is identify the through line between all those columns. What is it? I said, serving the next generation and the future of the church. And he goes, then that is your on mission call. Everything you say yes to has to hit the next generation and the future of the church. And everything you say no to is outside of that lane. And so that for me and then my wife and kids has become our on mission call as a family.
That's so good. And that's so helpful. I think even just growing up in the church and, I think calling was never, something that we heard calling over and over and over again. But I think somewhere along the line, and this isn't like a you and Christina thing by any means, but like somewhere along the line, I think it got ingrained into a lot of kids that grew up in the church that calling was vocational full-time ministry.
Yep.
And I think that's where that's part of, like, to me, my calling is just helping the everyday ordinary people live life to the fullest, or the rich and satisfying life that is, I think it's the Message translation way of talking about it. And I just love that idea. Like, there is a rich and satisfying life that's found in the center of God's will and the center of God's calling. And that's for my wife, who primarily stays home with kids. And, we just got a bunch of hail damage. Our whole neighborhood just got destroyed. So we're all working through insurance claims. And we've all got the same guy that's doing our roofs. And he was hanging out. We were basically having a block party with the roof guy. And he made a comment. He said, I can't get somebody to not think that Taylor is the queen of the neighborhood. And I just think, like, she has fully stepped into her calling of just being a community builder, being somebody that makes people feel joyful and brings light to every room. Amen. And I think sometimes that everyday ordinary person that doesn't have that stage calling or that up front and center misses out on what God has put in them and called them to. So this is so helpful, because I think when a lot of us hear the word calling, we almost shut it off. If we don't feel like ministry is ours, we kind of go, oh, yep, that's them. Right. This is me. But it's not that at all. God has something in each of us, and it's about finding that purpose.
Yeah. And I would say this as an aside. I think you said it, you called it out, and I just want to highlight it. A microphone and a stage is the lowest form of development. It's not going to get you there. It's just a place where you express for a short amount of time the calling inside of your heart. And it's not going to be the ultimate goal. And I know there's a lot of people who think, man, if I got a call, I got to be on the stage. I got to be on the mic. I got to be doing something that's up front. But the kingdom of God is built in the engine room, not the showroom. Showrooms don't advance anything. They're just the final products, the last 1% of the engine room work. And so callings are really wrapped up in that. So people might see, like, our social media feeds are like highlight reels, right? They might see, man, look at how Terry or how Stephen is fulfilling their calling. Oh, no. That's not how I'm fulfilling my calling. That's a product of how I fulfilled my calling. Yeah. How my calling is in the engine room. It's while I'm doing my doctoral work till 1 a.m. It's while I'm working 3 other jobs trying to reach the next generation and having conversations with people across the ocean about how to develop their leadership teams. Like Like that over there is not Instagrammable, but that's the engine room, and that's where the presence of God is, and that's where the pleasure of the Lord is, and that's where obedience is found.
Yeah, I mean, I always think like obedience is in obscurity, you know, like it's where the place that is unseen, the place that is untouched by the camera lens. And it's funny, I was actually in Mexico. I think we were zip lining, and we got there and they told us you can't bring your phones. Like you can't take your phones. And the initial like panic that went over me was like, how will anybody know? Like I can't take the sick video.
I want to zip line while showing my face. That's what I
Yeah,
want to do.
exactly. And it was kind of like a realization of the amount of things that I lose value in doing because maybe somebody won't see it. And that was probably 8 years ago. But I think that is so true that because we see everybody's calling, or so we assume, you know, so we see the, you know, we've talked about your social media presence just being on point. So follow him because it's great. But like it's so good to see it, and it's like, wow, Terry, you know, but really it's the obscure things that God is calling us into that we can find our calling, our purpose, and really what he wants to do through us. But I love your heart for discipleship. And that's, again, that was probably the biggest, and this is not a shot on any youth pastor I ever had, but I had a lot of fun in youth group all throughout. But really in those last couple of years, I also know my heart was just in a different place too. But to have a space to really kind of come to God and come to just an understanding of who I was, but also what God was calling me to, that discipleship journey that you started me on. I always mention like Chi Alpha obviously is my testimony because I talk about Chi Alpha a lot. I was in Chi Alpha. God really transformed my life in my college years. But it was those last 2 years of high school that God softened my heart and allowed those invitations to go in a totally different direction because of what the seeds were planted in that time. But how do we step into discipleship now? And like in this cultural moment, what does discipleship look like that maybe we would make assumptions that it's supposed to be a certain way, like it was back when I was in school or when I was in youth group, Bible study, or, you know, Sunday school or whatever. So what is discipleship to you? How do you define it, and how can we step into it?
Yeah. Side note, the way we did discipleship when you were in high school was very selfish on my part because we had Sunday night church that nobody would show up to. And I'm like, well, if I got to be here, can I do something I want to do? And so our lead pastor at the time said, yeah, go do it. And I started doing it. And I just wanted it to be a place where I could talk about the things I wanted to talk about, the deep things. And I wanted to eat the food. And kids started coming up. And I'm like, we got on our hands here. Like they want to go the deep, like ocean right away. And I started to frame my theology of discipleship. But when it comes to discipleship, I think what the church today calls discipleship is really just celebrated relationships. And that's a symptom of an attractional model of church. Now, before we demonize attractional model church, understand every few generations, the church goes through an attractional overhaul because the church falls in love with one way of doing it. And then we do it for 4 generations until it becomes so old and dead. And so the church in the last 25 years has gone through an attractional model. But the lifespan of an attractional model is about 20 to 25 years, right? And during that time, the church had kind of gotten rid of Sunday schools and in favor of small groups. So you get rid of the expert in the room and you just kind of democratize conversation. That means every small group only goes as deep as a leader leading them, or as committed as the one leading it. Statistically, small groups turnover, I think, 30% every quarter. And some of those people never jump in another one. And so sometimes when you ask a church, what is your discipleship plan? They'll say small groups. But often a small group leader is told, build your small group, multiply it, and split it so that it grows again and multiplies and splits, which is awesome. But what am I doing as a small group leader? I'm making it attractional. I'm making it, you got to come to this. I can. So that means what we call discipleship is often celebrated relationship. And what we have to do is we have to interrogate our discipleship models to make sure they're coughing up what we think they are. Discipleship is a semantic today, and it doesn't need to be. Some people are like, well, this is how I define discipleship. Let's just go back to the word of God. The word disciple meant somebody who follows their master so closely that you can taste the dust kicked up by their heels. Like, And it's not following the small group leaders, following Jesus. So does that small group bring closer to the heels of Jesus, people closer? And if not, it ain't discipleship. If it doesn't make you more like Christ, not a Christified version of your church, not a Christified version of the leader, but a Christ closer to Christ, that is what a disciple does. And the fruit of a disciple is somebody who looks more like Christ and exhibits the fruit of the Holy Spirit and is making disciples. That is discipleship. Now, you put it in that box, that cuts out a lot of what we call discipleship in the capital C church world. For me, I throw this artificial scenario out there. If Jesus sent angels and said, I am coming back in 3 years, and everybody is like, you're coming back in 3 years, what would you stop doing in regard to what you call discipleship? And what would you start doing to get more people into heaven? That changes a lot, doesn't it? That changes a lot. We'd stop playing games. We'd stop doing church certain ways. We would be all evangelistic. We would be all out. We would be all cultivating people's spiritual walk so that they too may win more, because we got a limited time before we can get people through the gates of heaven, before Jesus comes back. And so for me, I am very no holds barred when it comes to discipleship. And I will say this, I said at the beginning of this whole spiel that we are ending the tractional model, but what is emerging is a more missional model, which is you're giving people a purpose and a people to run with, a community and a mission. And so people after COVID, people weren't coming back to church because it had LEDs or smoke or great music. A lot of people would come back and be like, this doesn't feel the same for me. Their expectations had changed. The attractional model had died. And what they were coming back was looking for, I want to be on purpose and I want to be put with people who feel the same way. And so now I think we need to shift our reach model from evangelistic to discipleship, understanding that discipleship is the new evangelism. And that is only discipleship that causes true evangelism to take place, because what you invest in has to come out.
Right. No, that's good.
And there's a lot to unpack there too, but I wanted to try to make sure I fit it all in.
No, and I think that's good. Because I feel like maybe I've too tried to define discipleship in one ministry lane, but I don't know who I first heard it from. I think it was actually Mark Sayers, but he talked about just the messiness of discipleship, that discipleship isn't just a straight line, but it's just this jumbled mess of conversations, of trips, of just moments, of alpha, of just the different tools and methods that can be used, but it's messy. And I kind of had this kind of spark in my heart where there was a group of guys that I've been getting to know really well through Alpha that came to Alpha, got saved in Alpha, and then have hosted an Alpha table. But I pulled them for the summer and we just did morning coffee or evening rip your floats. And we would just sit around in the backyard and just talk. And we went through a different book and we read through John with the lens of what do you notice about Jesus, what he said, what he looked like, like how he addressed people, what made him angry, what made him happy. And it was just so enlightening for me to kind of take a new lens with that same desire of anything it needs to bring us closer to Jesus. But it does take time. And some of us aren't willing. And even myself, I have to check myself, because to take time to disciple people is a sacrifice. And we've talked a lot, we have discipleship tools, we have discipleship tactics, but we need a discipleship culture in our church where it's each one of us taking on that role, not waiting for the small group to start, but our everyday life. And so do you mind just speaking to that of that everyday person? What's the starting point? What's the starting line that they can get to right now?
Yeah. Before I say that, I want to say this. I did say small groups things. Vehicles aren't the problem with discipleship. Some people are like, small groups aren't the way for discipleship. No, put it in whatever vehicle you want. What you put in the vehicle is what matters. Yeah. And so, it's not the vehicle that is the discipleship. It's what you put in it. And so I want to make sure that we're not mistaking the vehicles for actual discipleship, but we utilize them in the way that's best to disciple people. And the first step you can take to be a discipler or to be a disciple is to simply say yes. You have to say yes, because you can't say no to a Lord. You literally, even historically, if you call somebody Lord, but you say no to them, you're out from underneath their protection and covering. Historically. And when you say, later, Lord, or nah, I don't know if I'm quite that person to disciple, maybe I'll leave discipling to other people, you're saying no to the Lord and removing yourself from his covering. And so to remain under the covering of the Lord is to simply start by saying yes. Now, I'm saying yes to the journey. I'm saying yes to learning. I'm saying yes to getting closer to Jesus and being like Jesus and making people look like Jesus. And I love how you framed it. And I want people to catch this. He said, we had an alpha table, then we did something different in the summer. But discipleship remained. And so it is through season by season, allowing discipleship to take the shape it needs to in order to accomplish that vision and to accomplish that goal. Don't get caught up in the legalism of it, I would say, after you say the yes. Be willing just to move forward with it. And not every season is going to be awesome. Not every group is going to be engaged. But
right.
This is what matters. We get our well done, good and faithful servant, not for how people respond to us, but for how obedient we are to what God's told us in the first place. And so I would say, let that be the first step and make a lifelong decision. Don't be like, I'm going to do it for this season and then take a break. But say, I'm going to be a lifelong discipler. I don't ever want there to be a time in my life where there's not at least one person that I'm not discipling. I want to make sure that I'm discipling somebody in every season until I die, And so for me, I think wonderful step. Use curriculum, use everything, but just make sure that the end goal is to make people like Jesus.
That's so good. I think there's a difference between a commitment to it and a conviction for it. If it's just a commitment, it'll only last as long as the tool that you're in or the vehicle that you're in.
Good.
That conviction is something that you can't walk away from. And so that's what I pray for our young adults and just the people that I get the chance to lead, our small group leaders, just that we'd have a conviction to disciple. And it's easier said than done, but it comes only from God, being in the right environments in the right moments. But yeah. Well, hey, Terry, this has been so much fun. I've been looking forward to it for a while. One question I do ask every guest is, if you were to have a conversation with the 22-year-old version of yourself, what advice would you give young Terry?
Dude, you're stacking against me. I'm 44 now, so that's half my age. All right. I'll say this. I think it's very important, and this is for everybody. The one thing I would say is, don't overestimate what you're going to do and accomplish in 6 months and underestimate what you can accomplish in 6 years. Because what you're going to do in the next 6 months with the call of God, with everything you're thinking of, pick one. And you probably won't even get that done. So don't overestimate what you're going to do, but don't underestimate what faithfulness in one area can produce, because it's far beyond and will eclipse anything you can dream of today.
So good. Love it. I agree. That's amazing. Hey, this is so fun. Terry, how can people kind of find you? Because I think not only is what you're doing with E21, everything else is really significant, but I also think that there's, even just as I was looking at your social media, getting ready for this, I was encouraged, I was challenged, I was convicted. And so how can we keep track of you and what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, social media is kind of like one of the only ways I put any content up there right now, because I don't like working on it, putting it out there. So I do it on social media. I have a website, terryparkman.com, or you can follow me at Terry Parkman at everything but TikTok and MySpace, or Snapchat. Instagram is all right. But that's where I'm at. And I talk with people all the time over that. So if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks. Make sure you give Christina and the girls my love. Just an incredible family. You're incredible. Love you. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, my friend.